Widely regarded as one of the best to ever lace up a pair of wrestling boots, Ric Flair enjoyed a long and legendary career littered with priceless moments and classic matches. A colourful character both inside and outside of the squared circle, Flair's in-ring success was not exactly mirrored in his personal life. A track record of poor judgment, bad decisions, and worse investments made Slick Rick a long list of enemies and left a living legend who has made millions scrambling to pay off his copious debts. A man noted for his fast-living ways, Flair's misadventures also found him on the wrong side of the law, landing him in newspaper headlines, courtrooms, and jail cells on a litany of charges. The 16-time world champion seemed to have more than 9 lives when it came to his legal woes, and somehow managed to come out of things on the other side, styling and profiling as he went. For Flair, however, the next scandal was seemingly never too far away. Richard Morgan Flair was born on February 25, 1949 in Memphis, Tennessee. A so-called black market baby as part of an infamous baby brokerage scheme based out of the Tennessee Children's Home Society, Rick, whose birth name was Fred Phillips, was adopted by Kathleen and Richard Reed Flair. They soon settled in Edina, Minnesota, and by all accounts, Rick had a relatively normal upbringing and was encouraged and supported by a loving family. A decent amateur wrestler in his teens, as well as a football player and track star, Flair decided to get into professional wrestling in 1971. Attending one of American Wrestling Association promoter Vern Gagne's notoriously difficult winter training camps alongside luminaries the Iron Sheik, Ken Patera, and Jim Brunzell, Flair passed the test and began training in earnest prior to making his official debut on December 10, 1972. It was just a few years into Ric Flair's career that everything came to a grinding halt. On October 4, 1975, Flair, along with wrestlers Johnny Valentine, Mr. Wrestling, Bob Bruggers, and promoter David Crockett, were involved in a plane crash in Wilmington, North Carolina. The pilot was killed, while Valentine was paralyzed in the accident, and Bruggers, after having steel rods inserted into his spinal column, decided against returning to the ring. Flair, meanwhile, suffered a broken back. While doctors told him he would likely never wrestle again, the hard-headed Flair endeavored to prove them wrong. After a few months of rigorous physical therapy, he miraculously returned to the ring. The accident did result in Flair, who had been more of a power-based brawler, to adopt a more technical mat-based style and accounted for his unconventional bumping method. It was also after the crash that Flair, borrowing from Buddy Rogers, adopted the Nature Boy persona that would help lead him to fame and fortune. Indeed, it was really during the 1980s that the self-professed limousine-riding, jet-flying, kiss-stealing, wheeling and dealing son of a gun would establish himself as one of the promotion's premier performers and the bedrock of the National Wrestling Alliance and Jim Crockett Promotions. Going all out in the ring every night on a schedule that saw him travel the globe and wrestle over 200 matches per year, Flair pushed things just as hard when it came to the nightlife. The after-show drinking sessions of the era were the stuff of legend, and Rick also freely splashed the cash in his personal life, giving his young family a lifestyle that few could dream of. While purchasing all the fancy clothes, lavish houses, and other expensive toys like cars and boats, Ric Flair neglected to pay his taxes. The trouble began in 1990 when Nate was handed a notice informing him that he owed $68,000 in back taxes from 1982, 83, and 88. He must have paid the money and been let off with a warning since nothing else was made of it. In November of 1990, Flair was clocked doing 95 miles per hour in a 65 zone while traveling through Beckley, West Virginia. Records show that Flair wrestled on a WCW house show in Charleston, about an hour's drive from Beckley on November 16th. As a consequence, Ric was made to apply for a restricted license, enabling him to drive to and from airports to show venues. The license was granted almost a year later. Speeding was nothing new to the Nature Boy, of course. Jesse Ventura tried to deter Ric from entering politics after Flair informed the body that he had racked up 143 speeding tickets in his life. 1990 was also notable as the year Ric Flair met Deanne Seiden, a deluded fan from Flint, Michigan, who would stalk and threaten Flair's family over the course of the next 8 years. In 1992, Seiden gave birth to a baby girl named Tiffany, whom she claimed was fathered by the dirtiest player in the game. According to Flair, Seiden would show up wherever he did, and he had her arrested in Detroit, Chicago, and Dayton. In Flair's home of Charlotte, North Carolina, Seiden bit a police officer who attempted to arrest her. She had moved to Charlotte and began working there in an attempt to get closer to the Flair family. On one occasion, Seiden showed up in Cleveland, Ohio and encountered waiting police. When she saw the officers, she fled, driving down the wrong side of the motorway in a high-speed chase. It eventually took 9 cops to take her down. Despite multiple arrests and Ric personally trying to deter her with insults, Seiden ramped up her campaign of harassment. On January 3rd, 1998, Seiden threatened to kill Flair and her own daughter if he didn't meet with her. She also phoned Flair's wife Elizabeth, more commonly referred to as Beth, and left threatening messages. Seiden also made the bizarre move to file a ludicrous domestic violence complaint against Flair, claiming that he had beaten her up and threatened to kidnap her. Finally, a judge intervened and issued an injunction preventing Seiden from having any contact with Ric Flair or his family. That was the end of the Nature Boy's nightmare, but Seiden would years later do the same with Kurt Angle, who did admit to having an affair with her. During the 90s, Flair had further issues when it came to the road. At 1:35 a.m. on March 3, 1996, Ric was arrested in Charlotte, North Carolina with regards to being a passenger in a DWI. Not only was the woman driving his vehicle over twice the legal limit, she was also under the legal drinking age. According to Flair, he, his wife and some friends went out drinking after attending a Charlotte Hornets basketball game. Too wasted to get behind the wheel himself, Colette McCune, a friend of Flair's wife, was entrusted with taking him home. After committing a traffic violation, the car was pulled over by police and the 20-year-old McCune was discovered to have a 0.15 blood alcohol level. For being a passenger, Ric was facing a charge of a $100 minimum fine and a jail term of between 1 and 60 days, typically suspended for first-time offenders. Flair claimed that he didn't realize McCune was drunk and noted that he certainly wouldn't have allowed her to drive his new $100,000 car if that was the case. In any event, the story made the local media in Charlotte and Greensboro. Flair was incensed when local police reports released to the media listing him as being charged with DWI, not McCune. Evidently, Flair received a slap on the wrist and the incident was quickly forgotten about. He may have evaded punishment in this case, but his money woes always ended up catching up with Flair in the end. It was during the 90s that Flair, as well as his then-wife Beth, displayed a troubling pattern when it came to how they handled their finances. In particular, their inability to pay banks, businesses, and friends who had either loaned them money or provided a service for which they naturally expected to be compensated. In 1996, the New York-based Macrolise International sued Flair for failure to pay for $66,000 worth of gym equipment and fees for his Gold's Gym franchise in Hickory, North Carolina. Flair neglected to plead or defend himself in any way, handing Macrolise a default judgment. In 1997, a Charlotte painter named John Hennigan also received a default judgment against Flair for $1,500. Hennigan and his crew had done substantial work painting Flair's family home inside and out, which took 3 weeks. He claimed the Flairs wouldn't let them complete their final day on the job and then neglected to pay them for the work they had already done. He also asserted that Beth had treated them poorly and was rude. Meanwhile, at work, Ric could certainly say he had been treated badly by his boss, Eric Bischoff. Bischoff threatened to sue Flair into bankruptcy after Ric had missed an April 9, 1998 Thunder taping in Tallahassee, Florida, in order to attend his 9-year-old son Reed's amateur wrestling tournament in Detroit, which Reed ended up winning. WCW filed a $2 million breach of contract suit against Flair, which to insiders seemed harsh since Flair had told the company in advance that he wouldn't be able to make the tapings because of the tournament. Besides, Flair at the time was working on a mutual agreement and had not yet signed an official contract. After almost 5 months of back and forth between the two sides, they eventually reconciled their differences and Flair returned to work on the September 14, 1998 edition of Monday Nitro. Flair and Bischoff would quickly start a program based on their real-life animosity. The money troubles continued to mount for the Flairs, and in 2000 it was revealed that Ric owed $15,000 in back taxes, interest and late penalties to the state of North Carolina from 1989. That same year, Branch Banking and Trust received a $20,000 default judgment against Flair for the money he owed on a loan. In 2001, Flair was forced to settle out of court with North Carolina-based Household Bank. The Flairs had financed around $20,000 worth of furniture through the bank in 1999. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was tricked into paying more than $26,000 on the principal, and their account with the bank ended up showing a balance of almost $8,000 plus interest accruing. Adding to their woes, bank representatives would call Flair in the early hours of the morning and threaten his wrestling earnings. Ric's means of earning money would soon change when he decided to accept a buyout of his guaranteed Time Warner contract, which he continued to be paid on after WCW collapsed, and joined WWE in November. It didn't take him too long to find himself in the headlines for the wrong reasons. Following a brief European tour capped off with the UK exclusive Insurrection pay-per-view, WWE's crew flew home to the United States on May 5, 2002. This chartered flight would soon become known as the Plane Ride from Hell, its events continuing to live on in infamy. On the same flight that Curt Hennig and Brock Lesnar got into a scuffle in the aisle and X-Pac cut off the ponytail of a sleeping Michael Hayes who had earlier been knocked out by Bradshaw, Scott Hall, Dustin Goldust Runnels and Ric Flair were all accused of harassing and, in some instances, assaulting the flight staff. Hall and Hennig were fired upon their return to the States, while Runnels was fined heavily and given a stern warning by management since he had also caused a scene by serenading his mortified ex-wife Terry over the plane's PA system. Flair, meanwhile, received no such punishment for his part in the debauchery, which had been fueled by a misguided open bar policy. Almost 2 years later, in April of 2004, however, 2 of the flight attendants working that day would file suit against WWE, naming and shaming Hall, Runnels, and Flair for their alcohol-aided transgressions. Heidi Doyle and Tarolyn Capilano would claim that Flair paraded up and down the aisles of the aircraft in nothing but his ring robe, spun his penis around, grabbed each woman's hand and placed it on his crotch, and forcibly detained and prevented Doyle from leaving the back of the galley. Flair subsequently professed his innocence and claimed that there was no truth to the allegations, questioning why it took the women 2 years to make their accusations public. Nevertheless, WWE decided to settle the matter out of court shortly after the suit was filed. The Plane Ride from Hell received renewed attention almost 20 years after the fact, when it was the subject of a highly anticipated episode of the Vice TV show Dark Side of the Ring. In a new interview filmed for the show, Doyle once again reiterated her version of events, with Flair issuing another rebuke in response. In the aftermath of the episode airing, a Car Shield ad campaign featuring Flair was put on hold, and he was also temporarily removed from WWE's opening signature. No criminal charges were ever filed against Flair or anyone else in connection with the Plane Ride from Hell. Going back to May of 2002, Flair was once again sued by a business partner, Troy Wilkinson, for failing to pay him his share of profits. Flair admitted to owing Wilkinson $35,000 plus interest. Wilkinson was only demanding $22,500, and they eventually settled out of court. Having not learned his lesson from the 80s, Flair seemingly decided to not pay his taxes in the 90s either. Thus, it was no surprise in 2004 when the federal government revealed he owed a whopping $874,000 in back taxes. In response, a lien was issued on Flair's property and rights to property, though the government stopped short of a levy which would actually take his property in order to repay the debt. In July of 2004, a Charlotte resident named Ward Cargill sued Flair for breach of contract over $40,000 he loaned Flair in 2000. Ric had agreed to pay the money back within 70 days, and well, here they were 4 years later. Flair had tried to write Cargill a check for $44,000, the loan plus interest, in April of 2001, but the check had bounced. Ultimately, Flair paid Cargill $10,000 and gave him a motorcycle. 2005 would bring no respite for the dirtiest player in the game as bad decisions continued to catch up with him. A lien was placed on his home by Peter Worth, a contractor and part owner of Tester & Worth, a company that had done work on Flair's home and claimed that they were owed $107,000. Worth's name would resurface in the future. In Flair's immediate future at this time was another lawsuit courtesy of BB&T, who was seeking $35,000 in repayment on a $400,000 loan that they had given him in 1998 for his Gold's Gym in Hickory. Flair would say that his business partners in the venture took advantage of him, basically stealing money and leaving him with the debt. He ended up paying the $35,000 and selling off the gym. In the background, the IRS was still after what Flair had failed to pay them in the 90s, and in April of 2005 began to dock Flair's WWE wages in order to get it. 2005 was a bad year for Slick Ric's personal life too. In February, he filed for divorce from his wife of over 20 years. In the divorce settlement, Beth accused Ric of all sorts of unsavory behavior, including verbal and physical. She also alleged that he abused alcohol, prescription drugs, and steroids, which she said caused him to fly into a rage. There were other accusations, but Ric had some of his own too, including that Beth was verbally and physically abusive towards him. The couple had also, as we've already seen, racked up some serious debts. The debt would continue to pile on for Ric, who not only owed the IRS, business partners and friends significant sums, but would also be ordered to pay Beth $140,000 as a lump sum, followed by $15,000 per month in alimony as part of the divorce settlement. Despite the generous payoff, Beth would unsuccessfully attempt to have Ric held in contempt of court for not sharing his Carolina Panthers season tickets. With all his monetary problems and a divorce in the works, it's perhaps no surprise that tensions bubbled over for Flair in spectacular fashion during Thanksgiving weekend 2005. The alleged incident took place on November 23rd on the I-485 in Charlotte, North Carolina. According to reports, a 29-year-old man named Robert Steele claimed that he was driving when the driver behind him began flashing his headlights. When he pulled over, the man immediately recognized the person exiting the vehicle as Ric Flair. According to the victim, Flair grabbed him by the neck, kicked the side of his Toyota 4Runner, and made a threat against him before getting back into his car and driving away. Steele said that he had 2 bruises on his neck and a dent in the side of his vehicle from the alleged attack. Years later, Flair would recall how Steele had previously pulled down his window and yelled at him while giving him the middle finger before throwing a full can of beer at the door of his brand new Porsche Cayenne SUV. Facing misdemeanor charges of simple assault and damage to personal property in connection with the alleged road rage incidents, Flair handed himself in to Mecklenburg County on November 28th and was released on a $1,000 bond with a pending court date of December 1st. His mugshot quickly made the rounds on the internet and showed Flair looking in rough shape, a result of the brutal last man standing match he had with Triple H at the Survivor Series pay-per-view the night before. Pleading not guilty to the charges, Flair said the following when asked about being in jail. "This system here treated me like $1 million. It's a great reflection on Charlotte and the city it is, and they were respectful and nice. They treated me with the utmost respect." Unfortunately for Flair, media outlets managed to unearth documents relating to his divorce from Beth, making public all the allegations she had made against him and laying bare his dire financial straits. Flair was engaged to be married to his third wife, Tiffany Van Demark, at the time. As an aside, Beth had claimed that Tiffany was Ric's mistress during their own marriage. The road rage case would be settled in mid-May of 2006, when a deal was worked out between Flair's lawyers and Steele. It had been set to go to trial on May 15th before the district attorney dismissed the charges against Flair when witnesses for both sides didn't show up to the deal being reached. Far from a let-up though, Nate continued to face problems elsewhere. In 2006, a company called Combraco Industries filed a suit against Flair seeking repayment of a $300,000 loan, which was allegedly to help finance the opening of 10 Gold's gyms. When the gyms either closed or were sold, Flair still owed more than $200,000, having stopped making regular payments in April of 2003. The company eventually received a judgment that Flair owed $185,000 plus interest and $10,000 in attorney fees. Fink's Jewelers joined the queue, seeking $81,000 plus interest after Flair purchased at least $76,000 of jewelry between November of 2004 and February of 2005. In October of 2007, South Carolina restaurant owner Greg Leon loaned Flair $47,750. When it became obvious the loan wasn't going to be repaid, Leon sold a Rolex watch he had been given as collateral. A motorcycle and boat that had also been given as collateral, however, ended up not having a proper title and could not be sold. In early 2008, a South Carolina judge decreed that Flair pay Leon the full amount of the loan. As if it hadn't been clear, Flair and his ex-wife Beth soon began to understand just how bad their financial mismanagement had truly been. But it hadn't just been bad investments and living well beyond their means that had landed them in the hole. They accused their financial advisor, Scott Storick, of purposely giving them bad advice and mishandling their finances via a scheme that involved dodgy insurance policies for his own personal gain over the course of more than a decade. The end result left Flair without life insurance and hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. Storick generously shared his saps with Peter Worth, the contractor who had sued Flair for unpaid work in 2005, the two conspiring to get Flair to invest heavily in real estate projects that, all told, ended up yielding no returns and left Flair a further $150,000 out of pocket. Flair sued both men and settled out of court for $230,000. Not that he got to see any of it, mind, since $60,000 went to lawyers and the rest went to Beth, who was by that point owed $708,000 in back alimony payments. Incredibly, notwithstanding being well and truly duped by Storick, Beth still considered him a close friend. 2008, the year Flair retired as an in-ring performer for WWE, brought yet more lawsuits and judgments against Flair. He owed $5,000 to a Charlotte golf club, $33,859 to a private school attended by his son Reed, was sued for $115,000 on a $140,000 loan to business partner Chris Porter, who had convinced Flair to start a company that was eventually shut down due to an illegal business model, and was sued for $130,000 plus interest by G&G Leasing for a loan taken out to rent gym equipment. His former lawyer, William K. Deal, even got in on the act, demanding $185,000 in unpaid fees. Deal had certainly been busy helping his client over the years. On top of it all, Rick separated from his third wife, Tiffany, with a divorce on the horizon. Then, in September of 2008, things went from very bad to much worse for the WWE Hall of Famer. On September 5th, Rick, his daughter Ashley, aka future WWE star Charlotte Flair, and her boyfriend Ricky Johnson were involved in an ugly scene in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Details were initially sketchy, but it transpired that Flair and Johnson had gotten into a physical altercation at the Sunstone apartment complex, which left the then 59-year-old bloodied and bruised. According to some reports, Rick, Ricky, Ashley, and a fourth person had been out drinking and watching a football game at a local sports bar when Flair apparently got into an argument with some belligerent fans and was attacked. Though Rick was supposedly hit with a bottle to the back of the head and a punch to the face, he declined to press charges because he was friends with the owner of the bar and didn't want any publicity to come from it. The trio retreated to the nearby apartment Ashley shared with her boyfriend, but things only escalated there. Per reports, Chapel Hill police were called at around 2:30 in the morning, with concerned residents telling them that a fight was going on in the apartment complex's parking lot. When police arrived, there was nobody in the parking lot, but a trail of blood led them to the apartment, with Ashley and Johnson answering the door. The couple were reportedly far from forthcoming and didn't indicate anybody else was in within the apartment, but a further trail of blood led officers to the bedroom where Flair was, sitting on the bed with multiple cuts to his face and his left eye swelling badly. Ric tried to downplay the situation and refused medical attention, even though police felt he needed to be checked out. Per the report, Ashley lost her temper as police were questioning her father and lashed out by kicking an officer in the leg. She had to be subdued with a taser, was taken down to the floor, cuffed, and then taken to the police station. Police had trouble determining exactly what had happened to whom and why, with all three being elusive with details and Ric refusing to press charges for what he called a private matter. According to Flair in the book Second Nature, Ricky hit him with numerous punches. In the same book, Ashley alleged that Ricky also hit her with numerous punches to the arms, with one hitting her in the ribs. In a separate instance, she claimed Ricky hit her in the head. Johnson, who married Ashley in 2010 before they divorced in 2013, would file a defamation lawsuit against her in October of 2018 based on what she wrote about him in Second Nature. The suit was settled in April of 2019. Evidence of Ric's rough night was displayed for all to see days later when TMZ shared a picture of his nasty shiner taken when Ric went out to a nightclub opening with his son Reed. Ashley was charged with assault on a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest, with a court date scheduled for October 6, 2008. In January of 2009, Ashley pled guilty to resisting arrest and was sentenced to 45 days in jail, which was suspended to supervised probation and a $200 fine. The charge of assaulting an officer was dismissed as part of a plea deal. The troubled Ric Flair also found himself in bother with the law in 2009, having previously been arrested for assault and battery on June 23, 2007. On March 4, 2009, Reed was arrested by Mecklenburg County Police for driving while impaired. He was released after posting $1,000 in bail. He was arrested again on April 26 after crashing his car. When police searched his vehicle, they found black tar heroin. Reed was charged with driving while impaired, driving with a revoked license, and possession of drug paraphernalia. He was released on $15,000 bond. Reed, who would have signed a WWE developmental deal had he not failed 2 drug tests, overdosed twice in 2011. Tragically, Reed was found dead on March 29, 2013. He passed away due to an overdose of various drugs. Reed was just 25 years old. In 2009, Flair's divorce from his third wife, Tiffany, became official. Rather than being a straightforward matter, in June of that year, things took a strange turn when Tiffany reportedly broke into Ric's home using a shovel in order to retrieve some possessions. According to reports, Tiffany made off with 25 stuffed Flair bears, 12 action figures, 2 handguns, 3 of Ric's famous wrestling robes, a ruby necklace, an heirloom that had belonged to Ric's late mother no less, and the Nature Boy's very own dog. Adding insult to injury, Tiffany allegedly destroyed several of the bears and even renamed the dog, a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel called Nate. Also in June, Flair filed a complaint against Tiffany, accusing her of stalking and harassment and claiming that she hit him with a cell phone charger while trespassing on his property. Trouble with ex-wives, ever-present issues with the IRS, his WWE contract expiring, and his son Reed's legal issues hanging over his head didn't deter Flair from marrying his 4th wife, Jacqueline Beams, on November 11, 2009. 3 months into their marriage, Beams was arrested and charged with misdemeanor assault after an incident on February 21, 2010. Beams and Flair had gone to a local sports bar not far from their home to watch a hockey game and then returned home. Shortly after, police received a call at about 11:40 p.m. from Beams' daughter claiming that her mother had assaulted her stepfather. According to reports, the assault lasted between 11 and 11:39 p.m. and involved Beams attacking Flair with her hands, teeth, and feet. Flair, who had made his debut with TNA the month prior, had visible minor injuries but refused medical treatment. Beams was arrested, booked, and then released after a few hours in the local jail. Flair's agent released the following statement following the incident. Ric and his wife had an unfortunate disagreement late last night, which led to his wife being arrested and charged with assault. Ric has done nothing wrong. The important thing to remember here is that we have some very exciting professional announcements in the near future. Ric finds this incident unsettling and is committed to correcting any issues in his personal life. Ric had plenty of issues to correct when it came to his taxes, with the state of North Carolina issuing a certificate of tax liability against him for $45,000 in taxes owed for 2008, and the federal government placing another lien on Flair's property for $627,758 in back taxes between 2005 and 2008. He also had an issue with Ring of Honor, the promotion Flair had a brief fling with as an authority figure and ambassador in 2009. On January 28, 2010, Ring of Honor filed a lawsuit against Ric, claiming he owed them in excess of $41,420 for dates paid for in advance, as well as other damages. According to the suit, Flair agreed to do 5 house shows for $10,000 apiece, with the money paid in advance. His contract stipulated that if for any reason he was unable to work one of the dates, he would have 3 days to return the $10,000 for that show. Ring of Honor claimed he only worked 4 of the dates, missing a July 24th event in Toronto. Additionally, Flair signed another contract with Ring of Honor in April of 2009, giving him $35,000 to appear at 7 television tapings. He only appeared at 1 and hadn't refunded the remainder of the money. According to the suit, there had been a big blow-up between Flair and Ring of Honor officials at the time, with Flair stating he didn't want to appear on ROH TV so as not to negatively impact his relationship with WWE, who considered the promotion a direct competitor. Ring of Honor president Carrie Silkin was said to be incredibly disappointed with how things turned out, as they had hoped to use their relationship with Flair to secure deals and partnerships elsewhere. Ring of Honor had also had discussions about bringing in Reed Flair prior to his arrests. ROH also believed that Flair was going to re-sign with WWE, but he ended up putting pen to paper with TNA instead. Silkin wound up dropping the lawsuit when he sold Ring of Honor to Sinclair Broadcasting in 2011. As recently as March of 2023, he claimed that Flair still owed him the money. Sinclair may have given up the legal fight with Flair in 2011, but other parties were still pursuing him. His former lawyers, Katten Muchin Rosenman LLP, sued him for $88,000 in unpaid legal fees. The firm had helped him in divorce proceedings with third wife Tiffany and also helped him secure trademarks, including for the phrase "to be the man you've got to beat the man," the source of a later beef with WWE star Becky Lynch. Property owners Wells and Donna Hall received a default judgment against Flair for $17,000 in unpaid rent and damage to property from 2010. The Moorhead Inn won a $4,000 judgment for money owed for a party Ric had thrown at the establishment for his daughter Ashley. In April of 2011, Flair was threatened with eviction from his home on Sharon Road in Charlotte when it happened that he was $4,542 behind on his rent. The property cost $3,683 per month. Flair paid the money and continued to live there. In May of 2011, an order for contempt and arrest was issued for Flair over his failure to pay $35,000 he owed to High Spots Inc., a wrestling retail company that specialized in memorabilia. The company had previously tried to sell one of Ric's NWA heavyweight title belts to try to recoup the money, only to discover that Ric had also put the belt up as collateral in the 2006 dispute with Combraco Industries. The NWA heavyweight title belt had been the center of a previous controversy for Flair when he debuted on WWE television wearing it in September of 1991, having left WCW while reigning as champion following a falling out with then WCW Executive Vice President Jim Herd. Flair agreed to return the belt so long as WCW paid him his $25,000 deposit, which all NWA heavyweight champions had to pay, plus $38,000 in interest. A court battle between WCW and Titan Sports ensued, and Titan ended up disguising the belt on television, and a settlement was eventually reached, with Flair returning the belt to WCW. A purported 6-figure deal between Flair and High Spots had fallen through, with High Spots owner Michael Baciccio claiming that the 16-time world champion had come to him to borrow ever-increasing sums of money. On June 25, 2011, High Spots released a statement saying that somebody had paid Flair's debts. Exactly 1 year later, police were called to another incident between Flair and his fourth wife, Jacqueline Beams, in the condo the two shared. According to police reports, Beams assaulted Flair at about 9:40 p.m. No arrests were made, and the story got a lot less attention than the previous domestic abuse episode between them. The couple split in July, and Beams filed for a legal separation in October, citing her husband's infidelity as one of the key reasons. According to documents, Flair had agreed to pay Beams $4,000 per month in spousal support, as well as a one-off payment of $15,000 to cover her legal fees. When she didn't receive any of the money, she filed suit against him. His lawyers, speaking to TMZ, denied her accusations and said that Flair looked forward to resolving the issue in court. Amid the less than amicable split from Jacqueline, Flair began dating Wendy Barlow, who played Fifi the Maid in Ric Flair for the Gold segments in WCW back in 1993. In June of 2013, Flair was ordered to pay $33,000 to Beams in legal fees and spousal support. Flair failed to comply with the ruling, and per the judge's order, a warrant was put out for his arrest. Though only a misdemeanor, the judge ruled that Flair would be arrested and held until he paid the money to Beams. Since Flair didn't want to go to jail, or pay the money it seems, he stayed out of the state of North Carolina, splitting his time between a residence in Georgia with Barlow and a place in Tampa, Florida with former WCW mid-carder Joe Gomez. Ric's daughter Ashley was training in WWE's developmental system at the time. The arrest warrant was officially rescinded on February 25, 2016, presumably because Flair paid the money to Beams. Since then, tales of Flair's escapades have quietened down, aside from a couple odd incidents over the last decade, one of which took place at Boston's Logan International Airport on April 27, 2016. TMZ reported that multiple witnesses had claimed Flair was acting like a drunk person while he waited for a flight home following a SmackDown taping. Airport police, on the other hand, said Flair was not drunk but had been treated for a minor head injury caused when he tripped and hit it. Other sources indicated that there had been a shouting match between Flair and somebody who had been rude to him before asking to take a selfie. Flair ended up missing his flight but boarded the next one available. Whatever happened, the whole thing blew over relatively quickly, and WWE were happy when it came to light that Flair both wasn't drunk and hadn't been arrested. Following another unsavory incident in May of 2024, Flair considered filing a lawsuit after he was branded a peeping Tom and a creep due to a misunderstanding at a restaurant. Flair was in Gainesville, Florida to attend a graduation ceremony at the University of Florida when he went out for dinner at Paisano's Stone-Fried Pizza restaurant. The 75-year-old was asked to leave the establishment after expressing his displeasure with how long the kitchen manager was taking in the bathroom. Flair, who suffers from health issues, claimed that he needed to use the bathroom and was angered when he looked through a gap in the stall and saw the manager texting away. Flair told him to leave the stall so that he could use it, and the ensuing argument ended with Flair being asked to take his business elsewhere. Flair denied being drunk, saying he had probably consumed 2 mixed drinks and a beer, and noted that his issue with the employee began when he informed them that he does not shake hands or sign autographs in the bathroom prior to the employee going into the bathroom stall. He maintained that he hadn't done anything wrong and even left a $1,000 tip, though the restaurant's manager rejected it. Several months later, Flair announced that he and wife Wendy were calling it quits after 13 years together. Tragically, Wendy's 24-year-old son Sebastian, who was very close to his stepfather, passed away just a month after the announcement. A couple of recent health scares, advancing age, and other realities of life have perhaps calmed the Nature Boy down in recent years, and he had to calm down really after so many years of instability threatened to overshadow what had been a glittering in-ring career, leaving his reputation in tatters and his bank balance barren. To be the man, you may have to beat the man, but to be Ric Flair, you must be able to combat lawsuits, pay off your creditors, and persevere in the face of public scandal. His friends, family, and fans can all hope that Ric continues on the straight and narrow, because Flair's legacy, like a diamond, will live on forever.